Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. If you love digging into the foundations of human thought and breaking down ancient texts, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're looking at the timeless power of agricultural metaphors. Long before the digital age, ancient writers used the everyday language of the land, stuff like sowing, reaping, stalks, and harvests, to describe incredibly complex human behavior and divine responses. We're going to examine two profound source texts that use these exact same earthly metaphors, but to paint two vastly different pictures of cause and effect.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just take a second to absorb the sheer intensity of this line. When they sow the wind, they shall reap the whirlwind. It's one of the most famous, most dramatic declarations in the Old Testament book of Hosea. I mean, think about it. You can't plant a chaotic, completely empty force like the wind and somehow expect to harvest a stable, nourishing crop, right? Instead, the result is multiplied chaos, a whirlwind. It's a perfect, terrifying encapsulation of cause and effect.
Section 1. Two Tales of the Harvest. Divine Judgment versus Compassion.
Section 2. Sowing the Wind.
So, let's start with the Book of Hosea. This is a text absolutely steeped in themes of betrayal and spiritual infidelity. But before we get into the specific grievances, let's ground ourselves a bit so we don't get lost in all the ancient vocabulary. When the text mentions Samaria and Ephraim, it's basically referring to ancient regions and tribes that represent the northern kingdom of Israel. These locations are the direct targets of the text's intense, laser-focused wrath regarding the people's spiritual infidelity. The author is essentially addressing a specific community that has, at least in the eyes of the text, completely lost its way.
And man, the text does not hold back. It lays out this rapid-fire list of specific actions that triggered all this divine anger. They're appointing unauthorized kings and princes. They're taking actual silver and gold to craft idols. They're worshiping this crafted calf of Samaria. They multiply altars to expiate sin, but then those very altars become occasions of sin. The divine ordinances are being treated like the rules of a total stranger, and their sacrifices are entirely superficial. The pacing of the original text really builds momentum here, painting a vivid picture of a society systematically abandoning its foundational laws.
So, what's the result of all these grievances? Well, the text uses some seriously vivid, elemental imagery to describe the outcome. Destined for the flames, such is the calf of Samaria. The author makes a real point to declare that the work of an artisan is, quote, no God at all. By placing their faith in crafted idols rather than their foundational laws, the text argues that the people have completely sealed their own fate. The very idols they built for protection are leading directly to their own destruction.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole consequence metaphor we introduced at the beginning. Because they sowed the wind, their harvest yields absolutely nothing of value. The text describes stalks of grain that form no ear, yielding literally no flour. And even if it could miraculously produce something, strangers would just swallow it up. The passage concludes with a stark pronouncement of punishment. God will remember their guilt, punish their sins, and send them back to Egypt, which was the ultimate symbol of exile and the total reversal of their freedom. It's just a complete, barren harvest.
Section 3. Sheep without a shepherd. Now, as we pivot over to the New Testament and the Gospel of Matthew, notice how the tone visibly changes to one of active ministry. The text describes a sequence where a mute demoniac is brought to Jesus. The demon is driven out, and the mute man speaks. Following this, Jesus travels through all the towns and villages, teaching in synagogues, proclaiming a gospel, and curing diseases and illnesses. This sudden, miraculous healing of the demoniac is the exact catalyst that sets up the polarized reactions we're going to see next.
Just think about the stark contrast in how this event is received by the community. On one side, you've got the crowds. The text says they were absolutely amazed, declaring, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. But on the other side, you have the religious leaders, the Pharisees. Their reaction is pure skepticism and accusation, claiming he drives out demons by the prince of demons. It's a fascinating sociological split, right? The general public is reacting with pure awe, while the established authority reacts with this heavy, defensive cynicism.
And it's exactly this fractured, divided environment that prompts a profound shift in tone. Looking out at these amazed but totally confused crowds, the text says Jesus' heart was moved with deep pity, describing them as troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. This simile marks a massive departure from the wrath we just saw in Hosea. Instead of anger at their confusion, the divine figure here responds with deep empathy and sorrow for their vulnerability.
And this brings us right back to the agricultural metaphor, but utilized in a completely new way. Jesus turns to his disciples and says, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest." Notice the framing here. The harvest isn't a metaphor for destruction or some barren field. It's an abundant rescue mission. The crop isn't failing. There literally just aren't enough workers to gather and protect the troubled flock.
Section 4. Contrasting the harvests. Now, what's really interesting about this is how perfectly we can contrast the application of this exact same agricultural imagery. When we compare them side by side, the thematic patterns really jump out at you. In the book of Hosea, the crop is the wind and empty stalks. The yield is a destructive whirlwind and no flower. And the ultimate result is punishment, flames, and exile. But then, looking at the Gospel of Matthew, the crop is an abundant field representing the troubled crowds. The yield represents a need for laborers driven by compassion, and the ultimate result is healing, teaching, and gathering the people together. It's just a brilliant illustration of how versatile these metaphors were in ancient literature.
So what does this all mean? Why spend time unpacking these ancient texts today? Well, because they represent enduring human frameworks for understanding cause and effect. Whether it's through the lens of strict justice or deep empathy, these metaphors remind us that our actions have profound consequences. The energy we put into our communities, our structures, and our relationships fundamentally shapes what we get out of them. Basically, what we sow, we ultimately reap.
I want to leave you with this one final thought. Think about the actions, the words, and the intentions that you are putting out into the world right now. If the seeds we plant today truly become the harvest of tomorrow, are you sowing the wind, destined to reap a whirlwind of chaos, or are you actively cultivating a field of compassion? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gives you something really powerful to reflect on today.